The signal came at 3:47 in the morning, Earth time. It was weak, broken, and full of static. But the words were clear enough to make every officer in the communications room stop breathing. Please, anyone, help us. The Hollow Empire comes. We cannot fight. We will not survive. Please. The voice belonged to a Valori. Their species was made of living crystal, beautiful and fragile. They had no weapons. They had no army. They had never needed one because they believed the universe was kind. Admiral Park. Dohin listened to the recording 7 times. Each time, his hands gripped the edge of his desk a little harder. He remembered the Valori. Every human did. 200 years ago, when humanity first left Earth and ventured into the stars, they were alone and afraid. The other species of the galaxy looked at humans like they were insects. Too young, too primitive, too emotional. No one wanted to trade with them. No one wanted to talk to them. No one cared if they lived or died, except the Valori. The crystalline beings had welcomed human explorers into their homes. They had shared food, medicine, and knowledge. When the Titan Plague swept through humanity's first colony and thousands were dying, the Valori sent their healers. They asked for nothing in return. They simply said, "You needed help." Now they were the ones who needed help. Admiral Park walked to the window of his office and looked out at the stars. He was 63 years old. His hair was gray, and his face was lined with the weight of command. He had fought in 3 wars and lost friends in all of them. He knew what war meant. He knew the cost, but he also knew what he had to do. The next morning, Ambassador Li Jie stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from hundreds of species. Some floated in liquid tanks. Some had bodies made of light. Some were so old that they remembered when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. Li Jie was small compared to them. She was 38 years old, with sharp eyes and a voice that never shook. She had spent 15 years fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. She was tired of being ignored. "The Valori are dying," she said. "The Hollow Empire will reach their homeworld in 6 weeks. I am asking this council to send aid." The elder races murmured among themselves. The Hollow Empire was feared throughout the galaxy. They were not a single species, but a swarm of creatures that moved from world to world, consuming everything. They ate planets. They ate civilizations. They had destroyed 47 species in the last 1,000 years. Elder Counselor Veth, a being of pure energy who had lived for 10,000 years, spoke first. "The situation is unfortunate, but the Hollow Empire is too powerful. We must observe and wait for a better opportunity to act." "Wait?" Li Jihe's voice rose. "Wait for what? For the Valori to be extinct? For another species to be erased from existence while we observe? War with the Hollow Empire would cost millions of lives," another counselor said. "The mathematics do not support intervention." Li Jie looked around the chamber. She saw fear in the eyes of beings who had lived for centuries. She saw calculations being made, numbers being weighed, and lives being measured like cargo. "Then humanity will answer alone," she said. The council laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it was the laugh of adults watching a child say something foolish. "Your species is 300 years old," Elder Veth said gently. "The Hollow Empire has existed for 50,000 years. What can you possibly do?" Li Jie smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You will see." On Earth, the message spread within hours. The Valori need help. The galaxy will not come. Humanity will go alone. Admiral Park expected protests. He expected fear. He expected people to ask why they should die for aliens who lived 1,000 light years away. Instead, The recruitment centers were flooded by morning. Captain Kim Yuno watched the lines of volunteers stretching around buildings. Young people, old people, soldiers, teachers, farmers, scientists. They came with determination in their eyes and anger in their hearts. Why are they doing this? She asked Admiral Park. The odds are impossible. We cannot win this war. The Admiral watched a young man embrace his mother before walking through the recruitment doors. The Valori were kind to us when we were nothing, he said. They helped us when no one else would. Do you think humans forget that? Kim Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I suppose not. The orders went out that night. All factories were to shift to military production. All ships capable of combat were to report to Earth's Third Fleet. All leaves were cancelled. All retirements were postponed. For the first time in 200 years, Earth declared total war. Not for land, not for resources, not for power, but because someone far away had cried out for help, and humanity had heard. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dawn, and looked at the 112 ships that had gathered around him. It was not enough. It would never be enough, but it was what they had. He opened a channel to all ships. This is Admiral Park. In 3 days, we jump to Valori space. Many of us will not return. I will not lie to you about our chances. But I will tell you this. The Valori believed in us when no one else did. Now, it is our turn to believe in them. Now it is our turn to show the galaxy what humanity truly is. He paused, and his voice grew hard. We are the ones who come when you call. We are the ones who do not abandon our friends. And we are the ones who will make the Hollow Empire regret the day they threatened those under our protection. The fleet responded with a roar of voices across every channel. The sound echoed through space itself. The war had begun. The shipyards of Earth had not worked this hard in 2 centuries. Day and night, the fires burned and the hammers fell. Ships that were meant to carry passengers were stripped and fitted with weapons. Mining vessels became bombers. Transport freighters became troop carriers. Dr. Bae Soo-jin had not slept in 4 days. She was the chief weapons engineer for Earth's military, and she had a problem. The Hollow Empire ships were alive. They healed themselves. You could shoot them 100 times, and they would simply grow back. She needed something that would not let them grow back. Her laboratory was deep underground, hidden from satellites and sensors. Around her, dozens of scientists worked in silence, their faces lit by computer screens and the glow of experimental reactors. They were building something new, something terrible. The calculations are complete, her assistant said, handing her a tablet. It will work. But the energy required. Dr. Bae looked at the numbers. To power this weapon, they would need to drain an entire ship's reactor. The ship would be dead in space afterward, unable to move or defend itself. Any crew that fired this weapon would be sacrificing themselves. She closed her eyes. There will be volunteers, she said quietly. There are always volunteers. She was right. When the plans for Project Sunbreaker were released to the fleet, Admiral Park expected hesitation. Instead, he received 3,000 applications within the first hour. Every pilot, every captain, every crew member wanted the chance to carry the weapon that could kill a hollow ship permanently. Lieutenant Cho Min-ho was 24 years old. He had joined the fleet 2 years ago, full of dreams about exploring the stars and making first contact with new species. He had never expected to fight a war. But when he heard about the Valori, something inside him changed. His grandmother had told him stories when he was young. Stories about the old days, before humanity went to space. Stories about how humans used to help each other. How villages would come together when disaster struck. How no one was left behind. We lost that, she had said, her eyes sad. We became afraid. We became selfish. We forgot who we were. Cho Minho thought about those words as he submitted his application for the Sunbreaker program. Maybe this was a chance to remember. On the other side of the planet, General Kang Tai-Wu was preparing the ground forces. He was a large man with a scarred face and hands that had seen too many battles. The Mars Uprising, the Europa Rebellion, the Titan conflict. He had fought them all, but this was different. We will be fighting on alien soil, he told his soldiers. The Valori are fragile. They break easily. Our job is not just to kill the enemy. Our job is to protect civilians who cannot protect themselves. Every Valori life we save is a victory. Everyone we lose is a failure. Do you understand? The soldiers nodded. They understood. General Kang looked at their young faces and felt something he had not felt in years. Pride. These were not professional killers. They were farmers and teachers and students who had picked up weapons because someone needed help. They were terrified, and they were going anyway. That was what made them dangerous. The fleet gathered in orbit, around Earth. 112 ships, ranging from massive battlecruisers to tiny fighter squadrons. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. It was also laughably small compared to the Hollow Empire. Captain Kim Yuna stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn beside Admiral Park. She watched the final ships take their positions and felt a strange calm settle over her. Do you think we can win? She asked. Admiral Park did not answer for a long moment. Then he said, I think we can make them remember us. I think we can buy the Valori enough time to evacuate. I think we can show the galaxy that some things are worth dying for. That is not the same as winning. No, he agreed. It is not. The jump to Valori space took 6 days. 6 days of waiting, of checking weapons, of writing letters home that might never be read. 6 days of fear and hope mixed together until no one could tell them apart. When the fleet emerged from hyperspace, the Valori homeworld hung before them like a jewel. It was beautiful, covered in crystal forests that caught the light of their twin suns. Cities rose from the surface like sculptures, delicate and ancient and irreplaceable and approaching from the darkness of space. The Hollow Empire came. Their ships were not like human ships. They were alive, vast organic masses covered in teeth and tentacles and eyes. They moved like swarms of insects, thousands of them blackening the stars. The largest ones were the size of small moons, and they pulsed with a hunger that could be felt across the void. Admiral Park looked at the enemy fleet and felt his heart grow cold. The numbers were worse than the intelligence reports had suggested. Far worse. All ships, he said into the communication channel. This is Admiral Park. What you see before you is fear itself. The Hollow Empire has destroyed civilizations older than human memory. They believe they cannot be stopped. They believe we are nothing. He paused and let his words sink in. Today, we teach them otherwise. Today, we show them what happens when you threaten those humanity has sworn to protect. They want to eat the Valori? They will have to go through us first. And I promise you, they will choke on every bite. Across the fleet, weapons powered up. Engines roared to full thrust. Pilots gripped their controls with white knuckles. Below, on the crystal surface of the Valori homeworld, the fragile beings looked up at the sky. They had sent their desperate message into the void, expecting nothing. Hoping for nothing. And humanity had come. The eldest Valori, a being of deep blue crystal who had lived for 3,000 years, watched the human ships form a defensive line between his people and the approaching swarm. Tears of liquid light ran down his face. They came, he whispered. They actually came. In the darkness of space, the Hollow Empire's lead ships opened their mouths and screamed. The sound traveled through the vacuum on frequencies that made the human ship shake. Admiral Park smiled grimly. "All ships, weapons free. Show them what we are made of." The first battle for Velari Prime began with fire. The first wave of human ships died within minutes. The Hollow Empire's weapons were nothing like what the intelligence reports had described. They did not fire missiles or lasers. They fired pieces of themselves, chunks of living matter that attached to human hulls and began eating. Through metal like acid through paper. The destroyer Morning Light was the first to fall. Then the cruiser Iron Will. Then 7 fighter squadrons that simply vanished into the swarm, like drops of water into an ocean, on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn. Captain Kim Yuna watched the casualty reports scroll across her screen. 17 ships lost. 2,300 souls. And the battle had only been going for 12 minutes. "Admiral," she said, her voice tight. "We need to fall back, regroup, find a new strategy." Admiral Park Do-hin stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the battle outside. The hollow ships were regenerating faster than human weapons could damage them. Every wound healed. Every injury closed. It was like fighting the ocean itself. "No," he said quietly. "We do not fall back. Sir, with respect, we are being slaughtered." The Admiral turned to look at her. His eyes were hard, but there was something else there too. Something that looked almost like hope. "Then we change how we fight. Signal all Sunbreaker units. It is time." Lieutenant Cho Min-ho was strapped into the cockpit of his fighter when the order came. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. Somewhere behind him, the weapon that Dr. Bae Soo-jin had created hummed with terrible energy. The plan was simple. Fly directly into a hollow ship. Deploy the Sunbreaker device. The weapon would release a burst of energy that would burn the organic matter from the inside, preventing regeneration. The ship would die permanently. The pilot would not survive. Cho Min-ho thought about his grandmother. He thought about her stories of humans helping each other, of no one being left behind. He thought about the Velori children down on the planet who had never known war, who did not understand why the sky was full of fire. "Sunbreaker Unit 7. Ready," he said into his communicator dot around him. 49 other pilots reported their readiness. 50 volunteers. 50 people who had chosen to die so that others might live. "Sunbreaker units," Admiral Park's voice came through the channel. "Humanity thanks you. The Velori thank you. Your names will be remembered for as long as humans draw breath. Go now and make them count." The 50 ships shot forward into the swarm. Cho Min-ho flew like he had never flown before. He dodged tentacles that reached for him. He weaved between organic projectiles that screamed past his cockpit. He watched his fellow pilots disappear one by one. Their ships consumed before they could reach their targets. 30 pilots left. 20. 10. His target was a hollow carrier. A massive beast that was spitting out thousands of smaller attack creatures. If he could kill it, the pressure on the human fleet would ease. If he could kill it, people would live. The carrier saw him coming. It opened its mouth, a cavern of teeth and darkness, and roared. Cho Min-ho flew straight in. The explosion was visible from every ship in both fleets. The carrier did not just die. It came apart, its flesh burning from the inside, its regeneration failing for the first time in 10,000 years of conquest. The smaller creatures it had been producing fell dead, their connection to the mothership severed. And in the wreckage, Cho Min-ho's fighter tumbled through space, broken but somehow intact. He had ejected at the last moment, the blast throwing him clear instead of killing him. His left arm was gone, torn away by shrapnel. Blood filled his helmet, but he was alive. "Sunbreaker 7 successful," he whispered into his communicator. "Target destroyed. I I am still here." The fleet erupted in cheers. On the surface of Valori Prime, the battle was even more brutal. General Kan Tawu led his soldiers through the crystal forests, fighting the hollow ground forces that had begun landing in the northern hemisphere. The creatures were nightmares made flesh. They had too many legs, too many mouths, and they never stopped coming. For every one the soldiers killed, 3 more appeared from the landing pods. Private Oh Yoonji was 19 years old. She had joined the military to pay for university. She had never expected to actually fight. But when her squad was separated during a hollow ambush, she found herself alone in a crystal clearing with a wounded Valori child. The child was small, barely reaching Yoonji's waist. Its crystal body was cracked, leaking light from a dozen wounds. It looked at her with eyes that did not understand pain, did not understand violence, did not understand why the world had suddenly become so dark. "It is okay," Yoonji said in a language the child could not understand. "I am here. I will protect you." The hollow drones found them moments later. 17 of them, circling the clearing, their many eyes fixed on the wounded Valori. Yoonji raised her weapon and fired. She fired until the weapon overheated and stopped working. Then she picked up a piece of crystal from the ground and fought with that. She broke bones. She gouged eyes. She screamed and bled and refused to fall. When General Kang's reinforcements arrived 10 minutes later, they found her body surrounded by 17 dead drones. The Valori child was alive, clutching Yoonji's hand with tiny crystal fingers. One of the soldiers had a camera on his helmet. He recorded everything. Within hours, the footage had spread across the galaxy. Humans in every colony watched it and wept. Aliens who had never thought about humanity watched it and fell silent. This was what humans did. This was who they were. The battle for Valori Prime continued for 3 months. The human fleet lost 43 ships. The ground forces lost 12,000 soldiers. But they did not yield a single city. They did not abandon a single Valori. The Hollow Empire had never faced anything like this. They had conquered species that were older, stronger, more advanced. But none of those species had fought like humans fought. None of them had been willing to pay this price. On his command ship, Fleet Master Ren of the Hollow Empire looked at the casualty reports and felt something he had not felt in 50,000 years of existence. Confusion. Why would any species do this? Why would they die for beings that were not their own kind? It made no sense. It defied everything the Hollow Empire understood about survival. He decided to ask. Admiral Park received a communication request on a Tuesday. He was tired, wounded, and had not slept properly in weeks. But when he saw who was calling, he straightened his uniform and accepted. "Human Commander," Fleet Master Ren said, his voice a chorus of screaming sounds translated by computer. "Explain your actions. Why do you sacrifice your kind for these crystal beings?" Admiral Park looked at the monster on his screen. He thought about all the soldiers who had died. He thought about Cho Minho, recovering in a medical bay with one arm. He thought about Oh Yoonji, who would never go to university, who would never grow old, who had given everything for a child she could not even speak to. "Because they asked for help," he said simply. "That is not a reason. That is insanity." Admiral Park smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then you do not understand humanity at all. And that is why you will lose." He ended the transmission. The war was far from over. But something had changed. Something had shifted in the balance of the galaxy. The humans were still fighting, and the Hollow Empire was beginning to be afraid. 8 months into the war, the galaxy finally began to wake up. The video of Private Oh Yoonji had spread to every corner of known space. Billions of beings watched a young human woman fight and die for a child of another species. They watched her refuse to surrender, refuse to run. refused to abandon someone who could not protect themselves. Elder Counselor Veth, the ancient being of pure energy who led the Galactic Council, watched the video 17 times. Each time, he felt something he had not experienced in 10,000 years. Shame that the Council had called humans children. They had laughed when Ambassador Li Jie said humanity would fight alone. They had done their calculations and decided that the Valori were not worth saving. And now, 8 months later, the Valori were still alive. Their cities still stood. Their children still played in the crystal forests. Because humans had decided that some things mattered more than mathematics. The council chamber was silent when Veth called the emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the screens that showed the latest reports from Valori space. Humanity has lost 61 ships, Veth said, his voice heavy. 18,000 of their people have died. They've been fighting for 8 months against an enemy we were too afraid to face. And they have not retreated. They have not surrendered. They have not even asked us for help. He paused, letting the words sink in. We called them children. We were wrong. They are something we had forgotten could exist. They are believers. They believe that when someone cries for help, you answer. They believe that the strong should protect the weak. They believe in things that we, in our ancient wisdom, dismissed as foolish. Ambassador Li Jia sat in her usual seat, watching the elder races shift uncomfortably. She said nothing. She did not need to. I am calling for a vote, Veth continued. A vote to join humanity in their war against the Hollow Empire. Not because we are likely to win. Not because it is strategically wise. But because it is right. Because we have watched humans show us what courage looks like, and I find that I am tired of being a coward. The vote was unanimous. Within weeks, ships from across the galaxy began arriving in Valori space. Warships from the Kashari Dominion, whose people had tentacles and 3 hearts. Science vessels from the Methane Collective, who breathed poison and thought in mathematics. Even the ancient world ships of the Eternal Fleet, being so old they remembered the birth of stars. Admiral Park Doyen stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn and watched the Allied fleet assemble. 1,300 ships. More firepower than he had ever seen gathered in one place. Admiral, Captain Kim Yuna said quietly, I think we might actually win this. Park allowed himself a small smile. Do not say that too loudly. The universe enjoys irony. But the tide had truly turned. The Hollow Empire, which had never faced organized resistance from multiple species, found itself fighting on 100 fronts. The conquered worlds they had absorbed over millennia began to revolt, inspired by the human example. What had been a simple feeding operation had become a desperate fight for survival. Fleet. Master Ren watched his empire begin to crumble and felt something beyond confusion now. He felt fear. How? He demanded of his advisors. How has one young species done this? We are eternal. We are inevitable. We have consumed civilizations that were old when their son was born. None of his advisors had an answer, but Ren had studied humans now. He had watched their battles, analyzed their tactics, tried to understand their impossible psychology. And slowly, a terrible realization had formed in his mind. Humans did not fight to win. They fought because fighting was right. They did not calculate odds. They calculated whether they could live with themselves if they did not act. Every soldier who died became not a loss but a banner, inspiring 10 more to take their place. You could not defeat an enemy like that. You could only kill them all, down to the last one. And there were too many humans spread across too many worlds. With too many OIs now, for the first time in 50,000 years, the Hollow Empire considered retreat. On Valori Prime, General Kang Tai-Wu walked through a city that had been half destroyed in the fighting. Beside him, a young Valori translator picked carefully over the rubble, their crystal body chiming softly with each step. "General," the translator said, "my people wish to understand something. The human soldiers who died for us, did they have families? Lives they left behind?" Kang thought about the question. He thought about Private O Yunji, whose mother had received a folded flag and a letter. He thought about the thousands of others, each with their own stories, their own dreams, their own loved ones who would never see them again. "Yes," he said, "they all did. Then why did they come? Why did they give up everything for strangers?" Kang stopped walking. He looked at the crystal being so fragile and confused, trying to make sense of a universe that had suddenly become violent and strange. "Because that is what humans do," he said. "We help. It is not always wise. It is not always strategic. Sometimes it destroys us. But we cannot see suffering and walk away. It is not in our nature." The translator was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, they said, "I think I understand now. I think I understand why the galaxy was afraid of you. Afraid? Not afraid of your weapons or your ships. Afraid of what you represent. You make the universe accountable. You make it impossible to look away and pretend nothing is happening. You force everyone to choose what kind of being they want to be." General Kang had no answer for that. He simply nodded and continued walking through the ruins of a city that still stood, because humans had decided it would. Across the galaxy, the final preparations were being made. The combined fleet was assembling for the last push, a direct assault on the Hollow Empire's breeding world. Kill the source, and the swarm would eventually die. It would be the largest battle in galactic history. It would cost thousands of ships and millions of lives. But it would end the war. Admiral Park called a meeting of all fleet commanders. Faces from a dozen species filled the screen, some human, some alien, all united by a single purpose. "In 3 days we attack," Park said. "The Hollow Empire has taken everything from dozens of civilizations. Tomorrow we take it back. Not for glory, not for territory, but because no one should have to live in fear of being consumed. No one should have to watch their world die while the galaxy looks away." He looked at each face in turn, human and alien alike. "We fight together. We win together. Or we die together. But we do not stop. We do not retreat. We do not abandon each other. That is what humanity has taught the galaxy, and that is the standard we will hold." The commanders saluted in a dozen different ways. But the meaning was the same. The final battle was coming. And for the first time in 50,000 years, the Hollow Empire was not the hunter. They were the prey. The Hollow Empire's breeding world had no name. It did not need one. For 50,000 years, it had simply been the source, the heart, the origin of all the horror that had spread across the galaxy. Dai was not a planet in the traditional sense. It was a living mass the size of a small moon, pulsing and writhing in the darkness of space. From its surface, countless ships were born every day. New swarms ready to consume new worlds. Today, it would die. Admiral Park Do-yun stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn and looked at the Allied fleet one final time. 1,312 ships. Humans, Kashari, Methane Collective, Eternal Fleet, and a dozen other species who had joined the war in the final months. All of them here, at the end of everything. Fleet Master Ren's command ship has been identified, Captain Kim Yuna reported. He is leading the defense personally. Of course he is, Park said. He knows this is the end. One way or another. The battle began at dawn, though there was no dawn in the void of space. It began with the flash of 1,000 weapons firing at once, and it did not stop for 3 days. The Hollow Empire fought with desperation now. They knew what defeat meant. Unlike other wars, there would be no negotiation, No surrender, no treaty. The galaxy had decided that the swarm would end, and nothing would change that. Ships died by the hundreds on both sides. The void filled with wreckage and bodies, and the screams of dying creatures. Admiral Park watched his displays track the casualties and forced himself to keep giving orders. Every death was necessary. Every sacrifice brought them closer to the end. On the second day, Fleet Master Wren's command ship broke through the Allied lines. It was heading directly for the Eternal Dawn, massive and terrible, its organic hull bristling with weapons. "He wants to kill you personally," Captain Kim observed. "Symbolic victory. Then let us disappoint him. All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel." But Wren's ship was too fast, too powerful. It shrugged off attacks that would have destroyed any normal vessel. It was going to reach the Eternal Dawn. It was going to tear it apart. Commander Shin Ji-won watched from the bridge of the destroyer, unyielding spirit. Her ship was crippled, engines failing, weapons mostly offline. They had taken heavy damage in the first day's fighting and had been ordered to retreat for repairs. She had not retreated. "Navigation," she said quietly. "Plot a collision course with the enemy command ship." Her crew looked at her. They understood what she was asking. "Commander." Her first officer began. "The Admiral cannot die. The fleet needs him. We are already dead. Let us make it mean something." There was a long moment of silence. Then, one by one, her crew turned back to their stations and began the final calculations. The unyielding spirit accelerated toward Fleet Master Wren's command ship. It was a small destroyer against a vessel the size of a mountain. It should not have worked, but Commander Shin had positioned her ship perfectly. She hit the command ship at its weakest point, where the organic armor was thin, where the nerve clusters that controlled the weapons were exposed. The explosion was blinding. When the light faded, Fleet Master Wren's command ship was breaking apart. The ancient being who had led the Hollow Empire for 10,000 years was dead. His consciousness scattered across the void. Commander Shin's final transmission reached the fleet moments before impact. "For the Valori, for everyone you ever hurt, humanity remembers. The battle lasted one more day. Without their fleet master, the Hollow forces fell into chaos. Their coordination failed. Their tactics became random, desperate, and IMASTIC. By the end of the third day, the breeding world was silent. The Allied fleet had landed ground forces on its surface and destroyed the reproductive chambers one by one. No more ships would be born here. No more swarms would spread across the stars. The Hollow Empire was dead. The cost was terrible. 370 ships destroyed. Nearly 1,000,000 soldiers from a dozen species. But it was over. On Valori Prime, the news arrived at sunset. The crystal beings gathered in their ruined cities and looked up at the sky that was finally free of fire. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply stood together, their crystal bodies chiming softly in the wind, and wept tears of liquid light. The victory ceremony was held 3 months later. In the rebuilt capital of Valori Prime, representatives from every species that had fought in the war stood together in the great Crystal Plaza. Humans and aliens, former enemies and new allies, all united by what they had survived. Admiral Park Do-yoon walked with a cane now. He had been wounded in the final battle and would never fully recover. But he refused to sit while the ceremony proceeded. He stood at attention, his eyes fixed on the memorial that had been built in the center of the plaza. It was a statue of Private Ayunji, carved from pure Valori crystal. She stood with her weapon raised, protecting a small figure behind her. The Valori child she had died for. That child, now grown, approached Admiral Park as the ceremony ended. They were beautiful, their crystal body unmarked by the war, their eyes full of emotions that humans could barely understand. "Admiral," they said, their translator rendering the words carefully. My people have a question that we have been unable to answer. We have studied your species, your history, your psychology. We still do not understand, Park said. Why did you come? Your species was young. Your resources were limited. The Galactic Council had refused to help. Every calculation said you would fail. Why did you sacrifice so much for strangers you had no obligation to protect? Park was silent for a long moment. He looked at the statue of Yunji, at the faces of his surviving soldiers, at the crystal beings who had been saved by human blood. Because you asked, he said simply. Because 200 years ago, when we were alone and afraid and dying, you showed us kindness. You asked for nothing in return. You simply helped because we needed help. He paused, his voice growing rough. That is what humanity learned from the Valori. That is what we tried to give back. Kindness, compassion, the willingness to help even when it costs everything. The Valori was quiet. Then, slowly, they reached out and touched Park's hand with their crystal fingers. We understand now, they said. We thought we were teaching you something small, a gesture of friendship. We did not realize we were planting a seed that would grow into this. You saved us, Park said. We just returned the favor. The Galactic Council formally recognized humanity as a full member species that year. But more importantly, a new phrase entered the common language of the galaxy, calling humanity. It meant invoking protectors who would come regardless of cost. It meant reaching out to beings who would never abandon you, never calculate your worth, never decide that you were not worth saving. It became the highest compliment one species could pay another, and the most desperate plea anyone could make. Years passed. The galaxy rebuilt. The scars of the war faded, though they never fully healed. And then, on a quiet evening on Earth, a communications officer named Han Yuri received a new signal. It came from a distant corner of the galaxy, from a species humanity had never encountered. The message was broken, desperate, achingly familiar. Please, anyone, help us. We cannot fight. We will not survive. Please. Officer Han smiled as she forwarded the message to Fleet Command. She thought about her grandfather, who had fought in the Valori War. She thought about the stories he had told her, about sacrifice and compassion and the strange, wonderful stubbornness of human beings. She thought about what he always said before he finished those stories. That is what we do. We help. In the void of space, a new fleet was already assembling. New ships, new soldiers, new volunteers who had heard the call and could not look away. Someone needed help. And humanity, as always, would answer.